In a Nuzlocke, any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, and I'm gonna try to beat Pokemon Scarlet, trying to make it all the way to the final boss, only allowed to catch one of every dark type. So let me know your favorite dark type Pokemon down in the comments below while you leave this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And right off the bat, our starter choice is a no-brainer. Sprigatito is the only eligible choice, but we won't be able to use it for quite some time since it only acquires the dark type as a Meowscarada. Instead, we pick up our first usable encounter in the Inlet Grotto, and Houndour is absolutely nuts to have this early since we can completely torch the first couple gym leaders without trouble. But while that may be the case, we have a monstrously terrible matchup versus the first Titan Cloth. This thing not only resists fire, but hits us super effectively with both Rock Smash and Rock Tomb. Considering that, I head back to Cortando to pick myself up an Eevee. But Eevee, of course, is not a dark type yet, so I run around a bit more until I find a Mastiff. And this little pupper is an excellent addition to the team since it comes with the best ability in the game, Intimidate. It also comes at the perfect time since Houndour reached level 17 while facing Brassius. He's gonna have to sit tight in the box until we manage to beat Cloth since we can't level past the next boss fight. Then during my preparations for the fight, I accidentally run into a wild Murkrow. I might as well pick it up while I'm here, but since it's higher level than the cap, it's gonna have to chill with Houndour in the box for a while. The real reason I was in the area was to pick up the TM for Dig, and I then force feed my Eevee until it loves me enough to evolve into Umbreon. From there, all I could do is find the courage to take on the Stony Cliff Titan, and my strategy starts with Mastiff using an Intimidate to lower its attack. I'm then at risk of being blocked in, so I swap into Umbreon, who just gets hit by a Rock Smash. Feeling blessed that 2 Rock Smashes in a row don't drop my defense, I decide to go for a Confuse Ray to give myself a little bit more legroom. On top of that, the leftovers I picked up at Delibird Presence and Cascarafa might keep me alive a turn or two longer. The Titan then outspeeds and hits itself in confusion, allowing me to hit it with a Dig the next turn, which does a massive amount of damage. It then just goes for a block, allowing me to hit it with another Dig, which just barely doesn't take it to the range where it doesn't run away, activating its Anger Shell. Even so, my leftovers have almost brought me back to full health after all those digs at this point, allowing me to hit it with a Dig the next turn for a swift victory. There is of course the second phase to take on, but after intimidating and switching out, I literally just put my head in the sand and allow Shelter to do all the work. Watch your step, it's pretty dark! Oh, sweet Arven.
You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it. Molded by it.
And speaking of dark types, our next opponent is the first of the Team Star bosses, Giacomo. There was no way I could let this man run free and give dark types a bad rep. So I knocked out his Poniard with a couple of digs and made his Starmobile a pathetic hunk of junk by weakening its attack with Baby Doll Eyes and special attack with Snarl. I then swapped around between my Pokemon to do as much damage as possible until eventually Houndour got the KO with a couple of flamethrowers. That's what you get for being a dark type imposter. After bringing justice, there's one more dark type I have to deal with to be rid of my evil competition. But unfortunately for Bombardier, not only does Mastiff lower its attack with Intimidate, but it also does massive damage with a couple of play roughs before I'm forced to swap out into Umbreon. This is however where I realized I did make a bit of a mistake, not teaching Umbreon a single move it can actually hit Bombardier with, so I have to settle for going for Confuse Ray. I then remembered there's a bug in Scarlet and Violet where if they get taken down into retreat range by a non-attacking move, they don't actually retreat, so I have to swap out into Murkrow. However, after setting up a Reflect, I have enough defensive capabilities to take a couple of plucks and take out Bombardier's remaining health. And even though I actually knocked Bombardier out because of the bug, we do have to face it in the second phase, and this time around, Mastiff can't do any damage to it since we're already at such low health. That's not too much of a problem though, since the second phase of this boss fight is a complete joke. Even though my Umbreon has no way to do direct damage to Bombardier, Knackley can just solo this phase of the fight. But defeating the Open Sky Titan isn't where my adventure with Arven ends quite yet. Since the Lurking Steel Titan has such a terrible matchup versus special attacking fire types, I decide to just take it out as well, even though I'm much lower level. And once more at the end of the second phase, Arven brings us the victory, getting us the 3rd out of 5 Titan badges. And while I'm not quite ready to take on the Great Tusk in the Asado Desert, we can at least go there to pick up a Sandile. Acquiring a second Intimidator, I could not be happier, but better still is that we just got a ground type right before we have to go up against the 3rd gym leader, Iono. Now, if you've watched any of my other Scarlet and Violet videos, you'll know that having a normal type and a ground type on your team completely locks her Mismagius out of playing the game. My plan A was to not use this strategy at all, however I did terastallize Umbreon into a normal type just to make sure we can guarantee the victory if we're in a tight spot versus Mismagius. I then made sure to weaken Wattrel's attack with Charm before swapping out into Mischief, who can easily take it out with a single bite. She then sends in the possibly derpiest Pokemon of all Generation 9, Bellibolt. The oversized and perfectly ripe avocado hits me with a Spark before I can retaliate with a bite, and at this point I'm at such low health that I have to swap out into my Sandile. This switch is completely free, however, since it can't hit me with Spark. Now expecting it to go for a super effective Water Gun, I can easily just swap in Umbreon and take this stupid thing out with a couple of digs. This brings out Iono's second to last Pokemon, Luxio. And since this is her last Pokemon before Mismagius, the plan is as follows. I end up setting up a Reflect and then use Charm 3 times to lower its attack to -6. Once that bit of setup is done, I can swap in Sandile for free since it can't be hit by electric type moves. From there, I can use the move Home Claws to boost my attack and accuracy all the way to +6. This in combination with the move Power Trip, a 20 base power move that gets 20 more base power for every boost you have, means I have a 390 base power move after Stab, and I'm at +6. You might be wondering why I didn't just do this setup against Wattrel at the very start of the fight. The reason being that Pluck would have gotten rid of my Person Berry, which allows me to snap out of confusion here, easily knocking out Mismagius in one hit, granting me the Gym Badge. Since the game is about to ramp up in difficulty quite a lot for us, I make sure to get some upgrades, starting out with Stunky. This fart-infused Furball taking neutral damage from both Berry and Fighting could definitely come in handy. I then make my way to behind the gym in Montenevera, since here we can pick up a Duskstone, giving us early access to Honchkrow. I then just stumble on whatever's going on here.
Why are you running?
And Sableye is an excellent Pokemon to pick up since we do have that glaring weakness to fighting. We can then also finally get our Houndour to evolve into Houndoom.
Wait, are you that kid who declared war on Team Star?
Call me Edgelord. Look, Mela of Team Star was an absolute joke. We're still in the early game where the Team Star leaders only have 2 Pokemon, and after I set up my Rain Dance, she was completely neutralized, leaving her team of Fire type stinkier than a dog's butt. However, in beating her, the level cap is now at 30, allowing me to evolve Sandile into Krokorok and Mischief into Mabostiff. The downside of the level cap being at 30 is we can't quite get ourselves a Cacturn before the fight versus the Water Gym leader. Regardless, the fight starts out great with a lucky flinch from Mabostiff, allowing me to take out Veluza the next turn without taking any damage at all. He then brings in his Wugtrio and hits me with a soft headbutt before I can hit him with Comeuppance, which does way less than I was prepared for. The tides of luck then seem to have turned as he flinches me with a headbutt twice. If he would have flinched me a third time in a row here, I would have probably thrown my Switch through a wall, but luckily he doesn't, and unfortunately, I can't quite pick up the KO with Comeuppance. Figuring he's probably gonna try to reel in another headbutt, I decide to swap in Thanos, who can dodge it due to being a ghost. I then pick up the KO with a Fake Out, and Gooey literally does nothing since Stall makes me move last no matter what. Since I'm at full health, I decide to stay in to tank the Terastallized Crabhammer, which I do on just 11 HP, after which I can fire off a Disable to not make him use it again. This makes it incredibly safe to swap in Umbreon, who gets hit by a Slam, then use a Charm, and immediately swap out into Honchkrow. The expected Rock Smash here does incredibly pathetic damage, even getting a defense drop, but it does not matter since a couple of acrobatics is enough to take out the Crabominable, granting us the 4th Gym Badge. Am I seeing things, or is this woman walking her Quillfish? Excuse me, what? So far the run has been going phenomenally well, but that was all about to change. Going up against Atticus, I came in with a plan, and to begin with, things went about as expected. The battle starts with him throwing medieval insults against my family. I then proceed to set up a substitute and a few Hone Claws to completely exterminate his first 3 Pokemon. And as expected, because Revavroom is so fast, this left me without the substitute as I face the final Starmobile. So I just pivot switched into Mabostiff to get an Intimidate and then swapped out into Umbreon to prepare myself to lower this thing's attack. And while my efforts were successful at first, heavily limiting the damage this thing could do, except eventually Atticus managed to land a noxious Torque that poisoned me. Now I didn't see this as too big a deal since both Leftovers and Moonlight were keeping me healthy. However, the clock was definitely against me since I really wasn't doing too much damage with Dig. And because it was taking so much time, Umbreon eventually got hit by a crit. And so just like that, I'd lost the bulkiest Pokemon on my team and the only Mon I had with Charm. Not only does this mean that I have a way worse matchup versus any physical attackers I go up against in the future, losing Umbreon could cause a ripple effect through the entire Nuzlocke, causing me to put more Pokemon in danger. What could go wrong? Having defeated Atticus, I was in search of some new Pokemon. So I scoured the nearby area and found myself an Impidimp, which actually happened to be a Zorua in disguise. I'm not really sure if there's a way we can use illusion productively since all the Pokemon on our team are dark types. With that said, I also managed to locate an actual Impidimp, and since our level cap is now at 36, we can finally evolve Stunky into Skuntank. I then evolved Zorua into Zoroark, and honestly, I think the devs ruined this thing when they made its 3D model, as if a certain internet community hadn't ruined this thing for me anyway. And while we're on the topic, getting to level 36 allows us to evolve our starter into Meowscarada, and they mostly did a great job with this Pokemon. Sick typing, amazing signature move, disturbing design. Oh, I also evolved Impidimp into Morgrem, as well as finding a dino in the Alfornata cave before it's time to take on Larry. We don't have a particularly bad matchup in this fight, so I start off with Mabostiff to get an Intimidate off on Kamala to lower its attack. From there, I expected to go for a Yawn, so I decide to pivot switch out into Sableye just to take it. Kamala's best move is to go for Sucker Punch here, so I can freely get in K. Rool, allowing me to get another Intimidate for free. I then go for Hone Claws to start setting up my stats as Kamala just hits me with a Yawn. The Yawn isn't a problem since Crocorock's holding a Chesto Berry, and I can set up a substitute the next turn as the Kamala just misses a Slam. From this position, it's incredibly easy to just set up with Hone Claws without Kamala being able to hurt me at all. Using this overpowered Hone Claws and Power Trip combo easily allows me to outspeed and knock out Kamala and the Dunsparce in one hit. Crocorock unfortunately doesn't outspeed Staraptor, however, because we're still behind a substitute, we can easily just allow it to take the hit and knock out the Staraptor in one hit with Power Trip. And so with the next gym badge acquired, the level cap finally allows us to evolve Crocorock into Crocodile, immediately leading us into our next gym fight, the double battle fight versus Rhyme. And if you know what you're doing at all, this fight is pretty much the Opal fight of this game. On top of that, we even have a type advantage for this fight, allowing us to instantly Terrasilize and take out Banette with a Night Slash from Meowscarada. Crocodile keeps it cool, just going for a Hone Claws to boost my attack and accuracy as Mimikyu hits a soft slash after it's been intimidated. The gimmick of this gym is that Terrasilizing gives you an Omni boost. Even though Meowscarada picked up the KO, Crocodile gets this boost as well, putting it at 8 boosts. I'm pretty sure you can figure out where this is going, but first I take out the Houndstone with a Night Slash as well as break the Mimikyu's disguise by using Crunch. The Mimikyu then hits another slash, but now I have a defense boost as well, so it does even less damage. Finally, Rhyme sends in her last Pokemon, Toxtricity, but because I took out one of her Pokemon, I get another boost to my attack and special attack to both my Pokemon. The speed boost from the Omni boost also guarantees that I outspeed both of the Pokemon, taking out the Mimikyu with a Flower Trick, which is always a critical hit. Crocodile, which now has 10 boosts, can easily take out the Toxtricity with a super effective Power Trip, getting us a very easy victory. After beating the gym, my Morgrem evolves into a Grimmsnarl, and I now have a big choice to make, either challenging the Alfornata gym or the Great Tusk Titan since they're both at the same level. And I decided to confidently challenge the Alfornata gym leader Tulip. In my mind, there was nothing that could go wrong. I used Nasty Plot to set up my special attack as the Farigiraf goes for Crunch and barely does any damage as I keep myself healthy with leftovers. I easily set my way up to +6 and then used a Flame Charge to boost my speed. From there, I could easily knock out the Farigiraf with a Flamethrower, and Gardevoir was soon to follow. Espathra put up a little bit more of a fight, going for a quick attack, at least chipping a bit of damage before completely getting destroyed by a Shadow Ball. I then face Florges, which is about to face the music. Wait a minute, did it just survive my +6 Flamethrower? Nah, I really screwed the pooch. Fortunately, this thing only has attacking moves, so Sucker Punch is always gonna outspeed and take out the Florges here, granting us the gym badge. And so, with another loss to the team, we go up against the Great Tusk Titan. Expecting a Brick Break, I Terrasilize to get rid of my Dark type and then use Trick to hand the Great Tusk a Choice Scarf. It instead goes for Rapid Spin, which does less damage, but it's the same outcome for me since I can still just swap out into Sableye, who's immune to the Rapid Spin. Great Tusk is an incredible threat to my team being a fighting type, but now that it can't hurt me at all, I'm free to just use Nightshade until it goes down. I was so happy with the results of this strategy that I decided to try it one more time during the second phase. However, this time it just goes for Knockoff instead, which does less damage since I've gotten rid of my item. I can then go for a Terra boosted Stab Flower Trick, which is always a critical hit, doing massive damage, easily taking out the Great Tusk and granting us that badge. And thus our journey takes us to Glaciado Mountain, where I stumble upon our next encounter, a Sneasel. There are a lot of fights in the game where we could benefit from having an Ice type on the team, so it's a very welcome addition. The Ice type is effective against a lot of our team members, so the final gym fight versus Grusha could be pretty scary. His Frostmoth, however, however, is no threat since we can easily one-shot it with a flamethrower from what's actually Zoroark. I can then outspeed the Beartic with a U-turn, swapping out into Mabostiff, getting off a free Intimidate before getting hit by an Icicle Crash, after which I get a bit of recovery back for my leftovers. The next turn, a Crunch actually does some decent damage as the Beartic just hits me with another Icicle Crash. I was really hoping another Crunch would do the trick, but it leaves Beartic deep in the red as an Icicle Crash leaves me on 2 HP. Because the Beartic has priority Aqua Jet, I have to swap out here into Thanos, this time actually Sableye, able to take out the Beartic with a priority Fake Out. Grusha then sends in his Satitan, a Pokemon with massive HP, great defenses, and thick fat to boot. I decide to stay in, however, figuring I can tank one Ice Spinner, disabling it before I swap out into Mabostiff. I decide to make this sacrificial play since it does give me a free Intimidate and a free switch in, but unfortunately I do have to lose Mabostiff. But Mabostiff's sacrifice wasn't in vain since Ice Shard isn't doing too much damage to Zoroark after that Intimidate. Because of Thick Fat, however, Flamethrower really isn't doing as much damage as I would hope. There is kind of a silver lining to this, however, since as I use my third Flamethrower, it doesn't quite KO, but it leaves Satitan at a range where I can just go for a U-turn the next turn. Not only does this KO the Satitan, but it also allows me to swap out as if I were playing on Switch mode, sending in my Grimmsnarl before Grusha sends in Altaria. And this Altaria is a threat to the team because of its Moonblast. It isn't even stab, but it does over half to Grimmsnarl, who can retaliate back with a Spirit Break, which isn't super effective because of Terastallization. However, it does lower Altaria's special attack, and together with leftovers, that's enough to survive another Moonblast that isn't a crit. From there, Grimmsnarl hits another Spirit Break, putting Altaria deep in the yellow and getting another special attack drop, which isn't necessary since a Sucker Punch the next turn is enough to take it out, granting us the final gym badge.
Most impressive, Edgelord. A shining display of talent, I must admit.
Whatever. My victory against Grusha has me inspired, so I go to Delibird Presents to pick up a Razor Claw, allowing me to evolve Sneasel into Weavile. Now this stage of the game is where our troubles truly begin. The two remaining Team Star members have Fairy and Fighting types, the worst possible combination. Despite that weakness, however, Meowscarada shows its value to the team in taking out all three of Ortega's first Pokemon on its own with Flower Trick. I then go for a U-turn versus the Starmobile, sending in my Skuntank. The vehicle interestingly goes for Steel Roller, eliminating its own terrain. From there, Ortega decides to hit me with a Confuse Ray, but Skuntank does not care. Skuntank, being the beast that it is, lands not one, not two, not three, but 4 Venishocks before it unfortunately makes the mistake of hitting itself in confusion and getting absolutely demolished by a magical Torque. I then decide to send in Crocodile to get an Intimidate off, however, I don't end up being faster than the Revavroom, so it gets off a Confuse Ray before I can move. And of course I have to hit myself in confusion, so not wanting to take the risk here, I decide to send in my Zoroark, and here I make a massive error. Thinking that Zoroark would be faster, it just gets taken out by a magical Torque. At least this gives me a second Intimidate, but unfortunately the Starmobile goes for another Confuse Ray. However, this time I don't end up hitting myself in Confuse Ray, and I manage to land a Rock Tomb. I then Terastallize to shed my Fairy type weakness, but unfortunately hit myself in confusion. However, because of the 2 Intimidates, the magical Torque barely does any damage. The next turn, Crocodile snaps out of confusion and with a Terra-boosted Earthquake ends the fight.
Oh, how could I lose? What the heck?
Dude, your biggest L is that haircut.
Look at the top of his head.
I see losing just 2 Pokemon to Ortega as an absolute win. Aerie, however, is even scarier. With Shift Gear on her Starmobile, she can boost her attack and speed and easily take you to Pound Town, and not in the way I know you want her to. After taking out her lead Toxicroak with Scarf Crocodile, I swap out into Sableye as Passimian goes for a close combat. Since it can't use Fighting against me, it goes for Seed Bomb as I go for Skill Swap, giving the Passimian my stall ability, making it so that it'll always move last no matter what. Since I know it wants to go for Seed Bomb, I can safely swap Honchkrow into some resisted damage. Then because of Stall, I know I'll outspeed and I can take it out with 1 Acrobatics. Expecting the Annihilate to go for a close combat, I decide to swap out into Sableye and then immediately pivot out into K-Rool. I was really hoping for a Rage Fist here, but after getting Intimidate, I unfortunately get hit by an Ice Punch. The close combat, however, is definitely incoming here, so I can safely swap back into Sableye, who actually gets frozen by Ice Punch. But then I immediately thaw out, luckily allowing me to swap abilities again with the Annihilate, giving it my stall ability. From there I can swap in Grimmsnarl, who easily handles Annihilate with a couple of Dazzling Gleams. Before the Starmobile, however, Aerie still has her Lucario, so I swap out of Grimmsnarl into Sableye, who can dodge the Aura Sphere. Since it won't ever go for the fighting move against my Ghost type, I can send in K-Rool safely as it goes for a Dragon Pulse, which doesn't quite take me out, and the next turn a Scarf Earthquake is enough to take it out in one shot. This leaves only the Starmobile, which is completely unaffected by Skill Swap or Trick. So I can't really get up to shenanigans, but at least I can switch in Thanos safely against a Combat Torque. Here comes the Shift Gear, sharply boosting its speed and the attack, which is incredibly scary as I try to get some damage with Psychic, and I really don't have a better move than to just try and chip this thing down. After a second Shift Gear, I'm starting to contemplate my life choices, and I'm not sure if any of my Pokemon can survive a hit, especially after a third. At least Sableye's been able to take it down below half health, but that won't mean anything if it just sweeps through our entire squad. My hope is to send in Sash, Meowscarada, or Weavile to be able to take out its remaining health, but it just goes for Shift Gear 5 times in a row, allowing me to get away with a free win without losing a single Pokemon. Okay, I'll certainly take it. Realizing how fortunate I am to still be in this run, I make sure to pick up a Bisharp while I'm still in the area. This thing isn't very fast, but having that secondary steel typing could really be useful since we lost Skuntank. I then head over to take on the false Dragon Titan, but since it's a water type, it's easily knocked out by my Flower Gift. Crazy how none of the Titans have given me trouble at all. No, not this scene. Don't remind me what I did to my Mabostiff. Oh, the guilt. Now that we have to prepare for the Elite Four, I head over to catch a Larvitar as soon as I can and level it up to add a Tyranitar to my team. And in the end, my Elite Four team ends up being Scar the Meowscarada with Flower Trick, Play Rough, U-Turn, and Night Slash. K-Rool the Intimidating Crocodile with Earthquake, Hone Claws, Rock Tomb, and Crunch. Riddler the Haunchcrow with U-Turn, Acrobatics, Foul Play, and Sucker Punch. Palpatine the Grimmsnarl with Bulk Up, Sucker Punch, Fake Out, and Spirit Break. Catwoman the Weavile, who really doesn't have better moves than Metal Claw, Ice Spinner, Ice Shard, and Screech. And finally, Godzilla the Tyranitar with Earthquake, Ice Fang, Swords Dance, and Stealth Rock. And with that, there's no turning back. We've committed to taking on the Elite Four Challenge, which I begin by instantly destroying Rika's Whiscash with a critical hit Flower Gift. This sends in Rika's Camerupt, which is a lot more of an issue, so I decide to swap out into Godzilla. After setting up the Sandstorm, a Fire Blast barely does any damage, and I decide to stay in one turn to set up my Stealth Rocks as I get yawned. I don't love the idea of being put to sleep, so I decide to send in Haunchcrow, who can neither get hit by Earth Power or yawn. I then go for a U-turn, swapping me back out into Tyranitar, who once again barely takes anything from a Fire Blast. I then decide to go for Earthquake to take out the Camerupt, and this way I'm not yawned going to sleep at the end of the turn. Donphan comes in and gets its sturdy broken by a Stealth Rock as I Terrastalize into a Ground type and use Dragon Dance to boost my attack and speed. Earthquake, of course, isn't super effective after Terrastalization, and I get a bit of health back with leftovers as I then go for Dragon Dance the next turn again. An Earthquake then actually gets me quite low, so I decide to attack with Ice Fang, which actually doesn't take out the Donphan. Very fortunately, the leftovers allow me to survive on just 6 HP. And just to not take any chances the next turn, I go for the 100% accurate Earthquake to take out Donphan. An Ice Fang is then enough to take out Dugtrio, and because Clodsire has terrible defense, it too goes down to a single Ice Fang. This means we have to go up against Poppy, an Elite Four member where we have a much better type matchup. I begin by Terrastalizing Tyranitar and setting up the Stealth Rocks as a Heavy Slam actually does some decent damage. I then start setting up Dragon Dances, but because Copperajah goes for a Stealth Rock the second turn and I can survive 2 Heavy Slams, I actually get 3 Dragon Dances. And at this point, since we've even broken Magnezone's sturdy, this is complete checkmate for Poppy's entire team. Except I'm an absolute idiot. You see, for whatever reason, when Poppy sent out Tinkaton, I remembered that it's faster than Tyranitar and completely disregarded the fact that I've got 3 Dragon Dance boosts. I have no idea why I did this. This was a very 3-head play, but at least I get an Intimidate boost off as K-Rool takes more than half damage. I then make another 3-head play sending in the Riddler since Tinkaton can't even use Gigaton Hammer again. Listen, if you make a misplay or two in your Nuzlocks, don't worry about it. It happens to everyone. Just make sure you try and not do it in front of a few 100,000 people. It helps. You want to know what's even worse? Because Crocodile has a plus speed nature, I just outspeed in the first place, taking out the Tinkaton. I'm too stupid for my own good. With that minor hiccup out of the way, we now have to fight the man so nice they made you fight him twice. And after instantly deleting his Tropius with a quad-effective Ice Spinner, he sends in his Staraptor, which not only intimidates me, but threatens hard with a close combat. For that reason, I can easily swap out into Sableye and slap that chicken with a normal gem boosted fake out before getting hit by a Brave Bird the next turn, which I just barely survive and retaliate back with a Power Gem. Now expecting another Brave Bird, I swap back out into Weavile, who's holding a Focus Sash, so I'm gonna survive no matter what, but Brave Bird doesn't even take me down to my Sash, and the recoil actually just handles the Staraptor for me. And from there, Stab super effective Ice Spinners is actually just enough to take out the rest of Larry's remaining Pokemon. The final member of the Elite Four is the Dragon Master Hassel, and leading with Expert Belt Weavile, it of course has enough to take out Noivern with a quad effective hit, but that Expert Belt just pushes it over the edge to take out both Haxorus and Dragalge in one hit each. His fourth Pokemon is a Flapple, quad effective to Ice, going back in the Pokeball as fast as it came out. I don't quite have enough attack to take out Baxcalibur in one hit, however, so I go ahead and swap into Sableye as it goes for Brick Break. I managed to hit it with a Fake Out, and I then plan to disable its Glaive Rush, but it's of course just enough to take Sableye out in one hit. This isn't all bad news, however, since Glaive Rush has a secondary ability where it makes Baxcalibur take double damage the next turn. This way, we did have to lose our Sableye, but at least we can get through the Elite Four mostly unscathed. Since I've neither trained Bisharp or Dino, I am gonna have to go into the champion fight with only 5 Pokemon, but we've made it this far. Let's see if our Dark types at least have enough to grant us a championship title. Leading off with Espathra, stopping us from doing any setting up, I decide to send in Tyranitar, who with an Assault Vest can easily tank a Dazzling Gleam and retaliate with a Crunch, taking out the Espathra. Second is Veluza, but all I have to do is send in Scar and annihilate it with a Flower Trick. This baits in her Go-Goat, and to my surprise, a U-turn actually does over half damage. I use my U-turn to swap into Weavile as the Go-Goat just bulks up. The Go-Goat, however, is at low enough health where that defense boost isn't gonna save it from the incoming Ice Spinner. She then sends in the most threatening Pokemon on our team, Avalugg, because it's got such a powerful body press. I go for a Fake Out knowing it won't do too much chip damage, but at least it gives me one more turn of Leftovers recovery. I then go for Sucker Punch to get as much damage as possible, but it barely does anything as a body press gets me down into the red, so I'm forced to swap out into Tyranitar. Geeta completely calls this play though, as she goes for Avalanche, doing massive damage, but the next turn I hit back with a Fire Blast, and at that amount of health, it's enough to take the Avalugg out. In comes King Gambit, and I could easily just stay in here and probably take it out with an Earthquake or two. However, I decide to swap out into K-Rool to get an Intimidate as it goes for a Kowtow Cleave. An Earthquake then isn't actually enough to take it out, but the reason I swapped into K-Rool isn't because of King Gambit in the first place. King Gambit would have to get 2 lucky crits in a row to even KO K-Rool, so I'm pretty safe here to just take it out. The actual reason I want my Croc out instead of Tyranitar is for Glamora, since it's Scarfed, it can outspeed and just take it out in one hit, claiming our victory over the champion. Wow, she really got that toxic upon losing. Shame on you, Geeta. Becoming the champion only cost us 7 Pokemon, and for that reason, we're in desperate need of some replacements, the first of which being a Lokix. Both pretty fast and strong, this thing is a very solid Pokemon. Then while I'm in the area, I make sure to take on 3 Bisharps surrounded by Pawniards with my own Bisharp, allowing it to evolve into King Gambit. Now that's a Pokemon for an edgelord. We still have the final boss fight of each storyline to wrap up, and I decide to start out challenging Arven. And initially, things go entirely to plan as I take out his Greedent with a close combat, then swap out into Meowscarada versus his Toedscruel to dodge a Spore. A super effective U-turn then does way more damage than I expected as I swap into King Gambit to dodge a Sludge Bomb. Now expecting a Spore or Earth Power, I can safely swap into Scar, who resists or is immune to both, and then just finish off the job with another U-turn. This both takes out the Toedscruel and allows me to swap out of Meowscarada into K-Rool. Arven's next Pokemon is Scovillain, and expecting the Energy Ball here, I decide to swap out into Meowscarada. I then go for a neutral U-turn, which does a lot more damage than I expected, and swap out into Tyranitar. With both an Assault Vest and the Sandstorm boosting my special defense, a Fire Blast barely does any damage, but it does, however, end up getting a burn. I then tank a super effective Energy Ball, but with my massive bulk, it barely does anything, not even taking me into the yellow, and a Stab Rock Slide is enough to take out Scovillain even with the burn. Going up against Garganacl, I swap out a Tyranitar into Grimmsnarl, who takes about a third from Body Press. I then go for a Fake Out just to maximize my leftovers recovery. With Garganacl's bulk, I'm not expecting Spirit Break to do a lot of damage, but at least I can do some damage since this thing is so punishing to my team. Anything I switch in can get totally destroyed by a Body Press, so I just opt for more damage as the Garganacl hits me with a Stone Edge, almost taking Palpatine out. A Sucker Punch then gets Garganacl low, but I don't quite have enough power to take it out with Grimmsnarl, unfortunately meeting its demise. Losing just one Pokemon to Garganacl is a fair exchange to me though, as I can take it out with an Iron Head from King Gambit. Cloyster then comes in and hits me with a Liquidation as I decide to set up an Iron Defense as the rest of his Pokemon are physical attackers. This means the next Liquidation barely does any damage, and since it lowers my defense, I get a Defiant attack boost. After another Liquidation, I then have enough power to take out the Cloyster with an Iron Head. This means Arven only has one Pokemon left, his own Mabostiff, which intimidates me, giving me another +1 in net attack. Unfortunately though, his Fire Fang ends up getting a flinch, so I decide to swap out of King Gambit into King K. Rool. I'm expecting a Play Rough here since I Terastallized into Dark, but at least an Intimidate makes it do less damage. However, he just ends up missing entirely, as I go for an Earthquake the next turn and get hit by a Play Rough, and a close combat is enough to take out the Mabostiff, winning us the fight and thus completing the Path of Legends. But we still have 2 more storylines to complete before we can go to Area 0, and funny enough, Clavel was one of the easiest fights in the game despite having one of the most well-rounded teams and the starter that's strong against me. As for Penny, the real Cassiopeia, we have an answer to pretty much every one of her evolutions. Low Kicks handles her Umbreon, K. Rool wrecks her Flareon, Scar evaporates her Vaporeon, Weavile frostbites her Leafeon, and K. Rool bulldozes her Jolteon before she sends in her final Pokemon Sylveon. This thing is a huge problem being a fairy type, so I swap into King Gambit, who's at least neutral with Steel type, but it still takes more than half, being destroyed by a couple of Moonblasts. I'm hoping to take a hit or two with Tyranitar, but the Sylveon starts out by going for Baby Doll Eyes, taking down my attack with priority. This makes my Rock Slide do a little bit less than a third damage. I then get lowered by another Baby Doll Eyes and miss my Rock Slide. Earthquake is only a little bit weaker, but 100% accurate, as I then get hit by a Moonblast for pretty massive damage. Another Earthquake then isn't quite enough to take the Sylveon out, as it goes for a Moonblast, just barely missing the KO, leaving me on 29 HP as the Sandstorm picks it off. What a way to finish up the Starfall Street saga. But ladies and gentlemen, to be the best, you've got to beat the best, and that is none other than Nemona herself. And going into this fight with only 5 Pokemon is a very confident move. She begins the fight by setting up her Stealth Rocks as I Terastallize into a Ground type and set up my first Dragon Dance. The worst thing she can do to me is Drill Run, and after Terastallizing, it's not even super effective, allowing me to set up as many Dragon Dances as I want. And facing a Tyranitar with +6 attack and +6 speed is a definite game over for Nemona. The only chance she has is if I miss a 95% accurate Fire Fang against Earthworm or the 95% accurate Thunder Fang against Quaquaval, but she's got no such luck. It's good to see Tyranitar is still the GOAT after all these generations. With the victory road completed, we still have to prepare for our journey down to Area 0. My first order of business is to pick up a Spiritomb on Glaciado Mountain. This thing is basically just better Sableye, and I'm glad to have it on the team. We're then ready to start the final quest of the game, the way home. And boy was I not ready for what I was about to find in Area 0. During my hunt for a very specific something, I ended up running into a shiny Sneasel. And even though it's incredibly late in the run, I've decided to invoke the Shiny Claws. In a regular Nuzlocke, with the Shiny Claws, you can usually just use any shiny Pokemon you find, but in this case, I'm just gonna replace my regular old Weavile with my shiny Weavile. However, after a bit more searching, I find what I was actually looking for in Area 0, the Roaring Moon. In fact, just trying to catch this thing, I was afraid it would knock out a few of my Pokemon because this thing is a crazy motherfucker. And to make things even crazier, we find a booster energy just outside of Sada's chamber. And so the time has come to take on the final challenge. Professor Sada may be an evil AI trying to ruin the world, but I'm ready to bring it. Leading with the bug-fighting Slitherwing, I decide to send in Meowscarada Scarada to take it out with a quad-effective acrobatics right off the bat. We're starting off good, but things immediately get worse as Sada sends in Screamtail. Expecting her to go for a super effective play rough, I terrestrialize into a grass type and use Flower Trick, which to my surprise does over half. The play rough then connects, but because Screamtail's attack is so poor, it barely does anything since it's not super effective, and another Flower Trick is enough to take it out. Professor Sada sends in her Flutter Mane, which heavily threatens me with a Mystical Fire, so I decide to swap out into Spiritomb. The Mystical Fire connects and does about 30% because of Spiritomb's gnarly defenses. I then get hit by a Shadow Ball, which does massive damage, and I finish the job myself by going for Curse, taking out my own Spiritomb, afflicting the Flutter Mane. And with that, I see no better time to send in my Roaring Moon, and with its booster energy activating my Photosynthesis ability, my attack gets boosted. Flutter Mane then hits me with a Power Gem, which at most can do 45% as a critical hit, allowing me to freely set up a Dragon Dance. This then makes me faster than Flutter Mane, allowing me to set up a second Dragon Dance the following turn as I get hit by another Power Gem, which doesn't even get a critical hit. I then decide it's time for offense, taking out the Flutter Mane's remaining health with an Earthquake. Sada then sends in one of her bulkiest Pokemon, the Brute Bonnet. It hits me with a not very effective Sucker Punch before I can slap it with a Fire Fang, not quite taking it out. Another Sucker Punch then gets me down into the red to just 30 HP as a Dragon Claw takes out Brute Bonnet. Sada then sends in her second to last Pokemon, Sandy Shocks, but this sad excuse for a Pokemon gets absolutely obliterated by an Earthquake. Finally, she calls upon Mega Salamence of Yore, activating its Photosynthesis through a booster energy. But it's too late, for I am the Warden of Darkness, the Lord of Edge, and I shall have my victory. And with 10 of my loyal subjects in the wake of my path, what do I learn? Though my dark types came out victorious in the end, we still couldn't save Arven's mom. And even for an edgelord like me, that was dark.